Keep in Step Limited, question and solution. There are two video tutorials associated with this question. In video tutorial number 1, we will review the question itself and answer part A. In video tutorial number 2, we will answer part B. Having a look at the question here, we can see in part A, we're asked to prepare a budgetary control statement, while in part B, you're asked to calculate the following subvariances. So to start off with, we'll have a discussion of the question and then have a look at part A. And as mentioned, in the second video tutorial, we'll have a look at part B. So starting at the top, we can see that Keep in Step manufactures a standard leather walking boot. The standard unit cost is as follows. So we have direct materials, and the materials is leather, and they use 3 square meters of leather at €5 per square meter, which gives us a total of €15 to make a boot. They need 1.5 hours of direct labour at €4 per hour, which is €6, and the variable overheads 1.5 hours at €2 per hour, which gives us €3 in total. The budget production sales for the final period of 2015 were 3,000 boots, i.e. units of KIS 1. And then during the final period of 2015, the actual results were as follows. So here we have the actual results. Top part of the question, the budget or plan, the standards. Second part of the question down here, you have the actual results. So what actually happened? Well, they produced and sold 3,200 boots, i.e. units of KIS 1. They used 9,750 square meters of leather, and the total cost of that was $47,775. They used 5,850 hours of direct labour, and the total cost was $23,985. Variable overheads. Well, variable overheads vary with the labour hours. So we can see up here, to make a boot, 1.5 variable overheads hours, which is the exact same as the labour hours. So down here we can assume that 5,850 variable overhead hours were used, and those 5,850 variable overhead hours cost 10,560. In these type of questions, you can always assume that the variable overhead hours vary with the labour hours. Now, let's have a look at part A. We are to prepare a budget control statement in a marginal costing format showing the, now this gives us the layout of our statement, the original fixed budget, the flexible budget, the actual results, and the variances. So what we're going to do is going to draw up a table, and our table is going to have 4 columns. One for the original budget, one for the flexible budget, one for the actual results, and one for the variances. And then we're also going to have to write in the narrative. Now in this case, we're only looking at the 3 costs: the direct materials, direct labour, and the variable overheads. There's no sales figure given to us, and there's no fixed costs. So therefore, let's have a look at the table. This is what our table will look like. We can see we have our 4 column headings: the fixed budget, the flex budget, the actual results, and the variances. I put a little column in here for units. Now we'll have units going across here, as in the number of units produced, and down here we can have the cost per unit. And of course I have the name of the cost over here. So we have the direct materials, the direct labour, and the variable overheads. So direct materials is the variable cost, direct labour is a variable cost, and as the name suggests, variable overheads are also variable costs. So first thing we're going to do is going to put in the units here, the unit costs. So what we're actually interested in here is the cost per unit of output, i.e. the cost of producing a boot. So if I go back to the financial information here, we have that information here. The leather cost is €15 per boot. The direct labour is €6 per boot, and the variable overheads €3 per boot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop that information in here. So there we have it. Direct materials, €15 to make a boot. Direct labour, €6 to make a boot, and variable overheads, €3 to make a boot. Now we need the number of units. The original fixed budget is where we're going to start, and what we'll do is we put here the original plan. So if we just go back here, we can see here the plan was to produce 3,000 units. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in here 3,000 units. Now I'm going to redraft my original flex budget, and this is actually fairly straightforward. 3,000 boots should use €15 worth of leather per boot, so therefore the original budget for the leather would have been €45,000. 3,000 boots should use €6 worth of labour, so the original budget for labour would have been 18,000, and likewise 3,000 boots should use €3 worth of variable overheads, so the original budget for variable overheads would have been 9,000, and that gives 72,000. Okay, so if I just put that in a little bit neater, that's what we have. So we will do the original fixed budget first, then we pop in the actual results. Now there's no real calculations here because you're given the actual results. So if I just go back to the question, you can see down here we have the actual results. Now if I just remove some of my markings here so it's easier to read, we can see for the leather the actual cost came to 47,775. For the labour it came to 23,985, and for the variable overheads it came to 10,560, and those costs were incurred in making 3,200 units. So therefore I'm going to pop that information in here. First I need to record the fact that the actual production was at 3,200 units. There we go there, and then I'll just drop in the figures I've just been discussing. So we put those in there. So now we have the original fixed budget and we have the actual results. I am now going to draw up my flexed budget. Now the flexed budget is going to be the original fixed budget, but we're going to adjust it to take into account what actually happened. And what actually happened is we made 3,200 boots. So I'll put this figure in here. Now I'm going to redraft my information, and I'm going to use all the original budgeted costs, except I'm going to base it on 3,200 boots. So given the fact that 3,200 boots were made and that it should cost €15 per boot for leather, we would have expected the leather cost to be 48,000. 3,200 boots should have used €6 worth of labour per boot, so we would expect the cost to be 19,200, and likewise €3 worth of variable overheads, so we would expect the figure to be 9,600. So the total cost should have been 76,800. Now I'll just tidy this up a little bit and drop in the numbers, so that's what we get. Now we're going to calculate the variances. Now the variance will be calculated based on comparing the actual results with the flex budget. That'll always be the case when you're dealing with the variable costs. And remember, each one of these, direct materials, direct labour and variable overheads, they are all variable costs. So I'm just going to highlight the areas I'm going to compare. So I'm going to compare the flex budget for direct materials with the actual results for direct materials, and I'm going to get the difference. And the difference is 225. So the difference is €225. Now I have to just indicate by putting a letter beside this, either letter F or the letter A, whether it's favourable or adverse. Now, given the fact that we produced 3,200 boots, we would have expected to spend €48,000 on leather. We actually spent less. So therefore, this is favourable. Costs are lower than we anticipated. Now, given the fact that there were 3,200 boots produced, we would have expected to spend 19,200 on labour. In fact, the labour cost came in at 23,985. That is a difference of 4,785, and the cost is higher than we would have expected, so it is an adverse variance. Now for the variable overheads, the variable overhead cost, given the fact we made 3,200 boots, should have been 9,600, in fact was 10,560. That's a difference of 960, and again this is an adverse variance. The cost is higher than we would have expected. So I'll just tidy this up here, drop in the figures, and what we have then is the direct material total cost variance of 225 favourable, the direct labour total cost variance 4,785 adverse, and the variable overhead total cost variance of 960 adverse. That's the answer to part A of the question. Thank you.